Welcome to episode number 64 of the Debt Free Dad podcast. You know, personal finances, and we talk about this a lot on this show, affect every area of our lives. Literally, they will touch so many different areas of the life, right? And our careers are really no exception. In fact, obviously, our careers is where the money comes from and how we're going to reach a lot of the financial goals that we have. And today I've got a special guest, Anthony Kuo from Untamed Career. Anthony is a career satisfaction coach, and he's here to share how he is helping individuals get unstuck in their careers and even some tips on how to make more money. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Debt Free Dad podcast, where we're helping normal, everyday people learn how to save money and kick debt so they can live a happier and stress-free life. Now here's your host, Debt Free Dad, Brad Nelson.
Hey, how's everyone doing today? You can find me on Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, and Instagram. Just search Brad Nelson, Debt Free Dad. And welcome to today's show. And I'm excited about today's topic. I know we've covered financial stress and how it affects your career on past episodes, but now we've got an expert joining us to talk a little bit about not only finances in your career, but also finding work that you're passionate about and work that you enjoy. I'm super excited to welcome Anthony to the show. Anthony built a successful career in marketing analytics, climbing up the fast lane at Fortune 500 companies. But while he learned all the tricks to getting ahead, the titles and the salary alone didn't make him happy. So he quit his job to study what makes humans tick. And today he combines his business experience with his work as a master NLP coach to help people create careers they're excited to wake up for. How cool is that? Anthony, welcome to the show, buddy. So glad that you're joining us.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, so we're going to start it out. Let's start out the conversation with kind of how you got here. You know, you mentioned in your bio that, you know, the titles and the salary didn't quite make you happy. You were missing some things. Like, walk us through that and how you got to where you are today, helping people through very much some of the same struggles that you were dealing with.
Yeah. So, I mean, I come from a background where like success and doing all the right things was the expected thing to do, right? So I did everything right. I checked off all those boxes, right? I studied hard. I went to a good school, got a good job, got that 6-figure salary, bought the house, bought the car, everything, right? I was living the American dream. And my parents, who are immigrants to this country, like they were very proud of me because I was basically like actualizing their dream for what is, you know, what's possible in the US.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was following this blueprint and doing all the right things, but I was just noticing in myself, like it didn't matter how much more money I made. It didn't matter how much more senior my titles got. Like I still felt the same, and I still felt like something was missing. And, you know, I got to give credit to my mentor who like at one of my jobs, he just like took me under his wing and helped me like learn all the tricks of the trade and helped me really figure out how to like rise to the ranks. But, you know, just hitting those performance metrics just wasn't cutting it for me. Like what I realized was that I was missing out on the emotional and lived experience of like actually being excited to wake up for work. And in fact, I was actually getting the opposite, where like every time I walked into my office, and the office was sort of like this big concrete building in like the brutalist architecture, just like imposing, right? And I felt like I was getting swallowed up every time. And I remember walking in, and one day I just thought like, man, this is where dreams go to die. Which I've spoken to enough people to know that I'm not alone in having that experience. But, you know, two experiences kind of woke me up to making a change. The first was like, I helped a friend out with her resume, and I'd gone through my career helping a lot of people like find jobs and connect them to different opportunities. I helped her just get her resume to a point where she was happy with it and felt like proud of it. You know, she was in a really thankless job. Like she was working 70 hours and still being told that like, oh, you're not doing enough. And she was stuck in this job for like 2 years. And it was like really magical to witness her transformation, to see that like, oh, if we just get her to be proud of her work, to actually value herself, like she actually got mad when we finished it. Like, normally I expect people like, oh yeah, great, I did it, yay. She got mad because she realized like how badly she'd been undervaluing herself, how badly she'd been letting other people undervalue her. And so actually from that, she went from being like stuck to, I think it was only 6 weeks later, she was starting a new job with a promotion. And then most importantly, like a team that was truly excited to have her instead of like just wondering why she was taking up weight. And so like just seeing how much someone could light up from moving a few crucial pieces around was like really eye-opening. And then I had my own, the second experience was my own parallel experience. Like what made me mad is, I was pulling out of work one day and I got into like a very minor car accident where like, fender bender is too strong a word for this, it's more of like a love tap.
Yeah. Right.
Right. But like the emotions we had to go through, like the insurance, the lawyers, all of that nonsense, it's just a very expensive slap on the wrist. That got me so mad that the car was just such a symbol for everything that was wrong in my life. Like I was reverse commuting from New York City into the suburbs. That was costing me 2+ hours every day, not to mention the gas and the tolls. Like I actually did the math. I think it came out to I was spending about $800 a month just on commuting to work.
Wow.
Like, like it just, I was burning myself out just to make that work.
Yeah.
And so, I had a plan to like transition easefully, gracefully from my, job and land in a, business with clients and everything. And I like that did it. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I actually quit my job a year earlier than planned. So had to do some interesting things with my savings account.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the story. Like I helped my friend out, saw her reaction, and then had my own experience of like massive dissatisfaction just crystallizing into one moment.
It's interesting how similar our stories are and how we got to where we are, because it was the same thing for me. When I started, when I got out of debt, it was something that I started people started asking me for help a little bit here and there. It wasn't even really, I wasn't like doing it as a job or anything. It was just like, hey, these are the things that we did. And it was the amazing results that they started to get and how much it transformed their lives is what I fell in love with, is what I love about my job. And that's how I got here. So it's interesting how you see the same thing, helping people with their resumes and finding passion in their work. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it doesn't get old.
Yeah, not at all. And I think, I've struggled with that too. Mine was more what kept me stuck, at least personally. Well, there's quite a few things, but money was a big one. I'd racked up a lot of debt and had a lot of payments and basically bought into the lifestyle that my salary could afford me. And at least a salary on debt, let's put it that way. And I really didn't have too many other opportunities out there that I could have moved and even, gotten another job and say gotten another raise. So I looked at it as like, man, I got to get my finances in order if I ever want to make a change or do something different. So that was my motivation. And it's interesting if you look at some of the statistics, like for instance, this one, there's a report from Salary Finance and motleyfool.com that says 42% of workers worry about their finances throughout the day. They say workers are 9 times more likely to let their money concerns affect their quality of work, 9 times more likely to have difficult relationships with their coworkers, and twice as likely to be looking for a new job. And another survey actually produced by Capital One, which I think is interesting that they issue credit cards and debt products out there, right? Found that 77% of Americans are anxious about their financial situation, right? And 58% feel their finances control their lives rather than the other way around. And 52% have difficulty controlling money-related worries and the stress. So over half of the population is just overrun by stress. So as a career satisfaction coach and as you've worked with individuals, how do you talk about the subject of money and personal finance and having a healthy relationship? Can you talk a little bit about that and how that plays a role in what you do?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the first things I ask my clients about when they walk in the door. Like, it is part of the enrollment conversation of how is your financial situation? Because these two things are like career and finance they're so obviously interlinked, right? Your career is where your money comes from for the most part, unless you have secondary sources of income, like usually it's your job. And, your financial situation and your lifestyle and the expenses that is that influences the size of the demand of your income, right? So when you have these things in like, basically in lockstep, you can very easily get to a place where you feel like you don't have options, right?
Yeah.
And I always tell people that like confidence comes from having options, right? There's a huge difference between when we get a job offer and they're the only game in town, kind of like what you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be like, oh my God, you're going to get down on your knees and you're going to like plead, like, I'll take anything for this, right? As opposed to, if you imagine you got a job offer, but they're one of like 4 and you're considering them and you're playing the numbers and you're just being like, hey, this is the best offer. Can you beat that? Right? There's so much more confidence in that. So, you can create more options through getting more job offers, for example, but you also have more options when your financial situation gives you degrees of freedom, right? Yeah. There's a huge difference between when you're, saddled with debt or, you got to hustle just to, make ends meet. How many choices you can make on the career front are going to be limited versus, I had a client that, we did all the work. We had her feel really confident. Like we did the work to mine all of the gold that she had contributed throughout her career. And she got to a place where like, okay, great. I know I can get a job with this resume, with this set of skills, experience, et cetera. And then she went and took a sabbatical for like 5 months because she was like, you know what? I've been burning out. I have missed my children growing up. I want to spend time with my family.
Yeah.
And she happened to be in a financial situation where she could do that, right? She ran the numbers. She looked in her savings account. She, different bonuses and stocks and whatever coming in at different times. Like she did the math and was like, you know what? I can afford this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, right?
Yeah.
That's like the level of freedom that you can get in your career. Like obviously these things are interlinked. And obviously if you get a 30% raise in your job, you can pay down your debt faster.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think over the years I've worked with, there's 2 types of people that I work with mostly as it relates to their jobs. There's those that are like really motivated to get their finances under control because they're not engaged. They're not satisfied with what they're doing for a living. And I know we talked about this because Anthony's in a mastermind group with me, and we talked about the weeks of your life. We looked at that chart that one time, right? And if you look at the weeks of your chart, the weeks of your life, the majority of the weeks that you spend are in your career years, right? I mean, this is where you spend the majority of your life. And so to spend that time not happy, not excited about your work, I mean, that's a lot of time you're spending on some of that stuff, and you can make different choices. And then there's the second person who we find that doesn't necessarily dislike their job, but they are just so stressed out about finances. They're working too many hours to keep up with their bills, and they've just fallen out of love with it. And they just need to, back up a little bit, not work so many hours. And we find that, hey, once your finances are in control, you actually can start to really enjoy the work you were doing because you just have less stress. And I want to talk a little bit about engagement, and I want to mention this statistic here real quick. It says, according to a Gallup poll, 13% of workers are considered actively disengaged. And they claim these are people who have miserable work experiences and they spread their unhappiness to their colleagues. And 52% of workers are considered not engaged at all, right? Those who are psychologically unattached to their work and company and who put time, but not energy or passion into their work. It says not engaged employees will usually show up to work and contribute the minimum required. They're also on the lookout for better employment opportunities and will quickly leave their company. But if you think about those 2 statistics, 13% are actively just not, they're just engaged. Then you've got 52% who are just not engaged. But that's 65% of the workforce that's just not terribly thrilled about what they're doing. Like, what do you make of those numbers when you see them?
Those are pretty depressing numbers, right? And I got another one for you. There was a study that The Economist did, like maybe, and I think it was in 2018, that said that 40% of workers think that their job, if their job or the entire department got eliminated, nothing would change.
Wow,
like that is 40%. That I mean, that is a level of disengagement that, like, They think what they're doing, what they're spending so many weeks of their lives doing doesn't matter. I mean, how much, like, of course that leads to disengagement.
Yeah.
Right. To me, it's about feeling trapped, right? When you feel like you don't have the option to do anything else, you just kind of suck it up. You just stay on that treadmill, right? You keep running it. You run you pay your bills, make it work. And you kind of start to adapt this, like, well, I can take it.
Yeah.
Kind of mentality, right? And for a lot of people, myself included, it's not death by, like, somebody came and chopped your head in half and, like, really did something horrible. I mean, that happens, of course, and you hear about that sometimes in the news. But, like, for the rest of us, the vast majority of us, it's death by 1,000 cuts, like one small indignity after another.
Yeah.
Right. And so, when that calcifies, right, when that, like, layers up and kind of turns into this belief that, well, there isn't anything more and I should just take this, then it stops people from even considering the option of there might be something else. There might be something more. And you like put yourself on a starvation diet, which is a really, really tragic thing to do because, again, we spend so much of our lives, so many, like the vast majority of our waking hours, our prime energy in our jobs, in our careers. And so that has the effect of us asking ourselves, especially if we're tied up with, trying to maintain a certain lifestyle. It's like you end up asking yourself, well, what can I sell, right? What skills, knowledge, experience can I sell?
Yeah.
Which is the question that we've been trained to ask, right? We've been conditioned to ask, but the problem with that is it puts the company, the employer, on the pedestal of, like, please, sir, please take this, right? Please give me a pittance for this, right? I'll take whatever you give me. And if you do that, you miss out on asking yourself a really, really important question of, well, what do you want?
Right.
What do you need? What interests you, right? There's a really important distinction between the skills that you have and the interests that you have.
Yeah.
Your skills, I'll give you an example. When I was young, I was raised by musicians, Juilliard trained musicians. So, like, world class. They taught me how to play piano to a very high degree, to the point where when I was 17, I performed in Carnegie Hall.
Wow.
I'm going to be honest with you. My mom might be mad at me. I did not enjoy this. Right. So here's a great example where I had the skill, tremendous skill, but, like, zero interest. It, like, took everything out of me just to, like, get it out.
Yeah.
Right. And like, my mom will hear that and be like, oh, what a shame. You didn't enjoy the music. But I mean, other things interest me. Right. For me, understanding how people work, that really feeds me. So like, talking about this stuff, I could do it all day.
I'm going to stop you right there, and we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to have you come back, and Anthony's going to share some framework that he teaches that if you're feeling unstuck and you're feeling, say, not super passionate about the work that you're doing right now, he's going to share just a little bit about how he's walking through people this and helping them discover some things about themselves to help them make some better decisions. Stay tuned.
Hey, if you love planners, this is for you. But you know why planners frustrate me? Because they only really get it half right. Now, sure, they're really good and fancy about helping you manage your time, which is really important, obviously. That's what a planner's for. But where they get it wrong is money, the second most valuable resource in our lives. Most planners don't include any financial planning. Things like, keeping track of paydays, bills, due dates, spending, yearly expenses, budgets, cash flow planning, debt elimination plans, and goal planning, right? None of that stuff. That's a real pain. And then what? Then you got to create your own in some silly binder, right? And who has time for all of that stuff? So instead, what happens? Nothing, right? A lot of people tend to ignore their finances even more, and things only get worse. Well, that all ends today because I am so excited to announce and release my brand new, totally awesome Debt Freedom Planner. This thing's awesome, by the way. Now, before you say, Brad, I've already got a planner. This is not an ordinary day planner. This is the Debt Freedom Planner, which is a companion tool that works with your day planner, and it's built to help you manage your money, pay off more debt, and melt away financial stress. And I believe this is the tool that a lot of people who want to take control of their finances have been waiting for. So head on over to therealdebtfreedad.com, click on the Debt Freedom Planner in the menu to get access to your planner today.
All right, guys, we are back. We are talking to Anthony Kuo about how to get unstuck in your career. So, Anthony, let me ask you, if I'm someone who's feeling stuck and multiple reasons maybe why I'm stuck, what are some of the things that you would do with an individual like me to walk them through essentially getting unstuck? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the first step is to really figure out what's going on. So it's to diagnose the situation, right? So why do you feel stuck? What is making you feel unhappy or dissatisfied? And really getting a clear understanding of like, not just the fact that you are feeling that way, but what is driving that, right? So maybe it's your boss, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's your commute, whatever that is, right? But it's also really important to understand why you're sticking around, right? Because if it was so bad, if it was all bad, you probably would have quit already. Right. So understanding your drivers of like what's important to you, your values. Maybe you have friends there. Maybe the salary's good, right? So just understanding about yourself and diagnosing, well, what needs are being met versus violated. And then the second step is to explore your options, right? So, when you can come up with like a care tag for yourself, like, oh, Anthony or Brad is happiest when these conditions are met, like, when you buy a plant and it says like full shade and water twice a week, like if you can do that for yourself, then you can go out and look for opportunities that match that, right? And sometimes it might be exactly the same thing that you were doing before, just in a different environment. And that's great. And sometimes you got to do a little bit more legwork, a little bit more research, a little bit more exploration, talking to people to figure out what that might be for yourself, what a career move might look like. And then once you've locked onto that, the next step is making a really polished presentation of yourself, right? One where you feel proud of it, and it also excites the people who are going to hire you, right? And this is where a lot of the career advice kind of comes in, like, that you find typically on the internet, like, okay, here's how you write your resume, here's how you interview, here's how you network, that stuff like that. But then the last step is to really secure the opportunity, and not only that, but to advocate for yourself, to make sure that those needs that we identified in the first step are getting met. And if they aren't getting met all the way, then to feel the agency to negotiate for them, to ask for them, to make sure that what you need is present.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about, because I think the common mistake that I made back in the day was when I was unsatisfied with my job, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to go find a new job. So the first thing I would just focus on was my resume all the time. That would just be what I would always just focus on. And I didn't really take the time to focus on, like you said, like that plant tag, right? Like what actually makes me tick? Like what are the things that I really want to be doing day in and day out? And I think a lot of people miss that. Do you feel that's probably a common mistake that a lot of people make?
100%. I mean, and it's reflected in the advice that you see out there, right? It's all focused on the resume because it feels good to take action. And to be quite honest, the resume is not a terrible place to start, because it when you make it about not just completing a document and checking the box, it can actually be a really beautiful experience of like digging into yourself and figuring out, well, what projects and contributions are you proud about, right? When you put it through that lens, like what did you enjoy about that work? That can be a really rich source of information to help you understand more about yourself, more about your situation, right? Because if your favorite part of the job was like a teeny tiny part, well, that might explain why you're feeling stuck, right?
Yeah. And Anthony's actually got a really cool resume workshop. We're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. If you're questioning on how to maybe write your resume or looking for tips and tricks on do that, Anthony will talk about that here in just a minute. But you talk about this really cool thing. Well, it's not a cool thing, but it's just a really cool teaching tool that I actually borrowed from you. I told you because it's genius. It's like perfect way to talk about it. And I didn't really think about it this way, but you talk about this thing called the misery cycle. And how a lot of people get themselves stuck in this misery cycle and how it relates to like a gratitude journal or being grateful. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and walk through what that cycle looks like?
Yeah, well, one of the very first things that I hear people say when they, start working with me is like, oh, I should feel great. I should be grateful that I even have this job, right? They're always like tossing this in as if to like apologize for feeling unhappy, right? They have to like justify it a little bit, like, oh yeah, but I have to be grateful. And it's great to be grateful. But the trap is when you allow that gratitude to lead to not doing anything, right? You are allowed to be grateful and hungry for more at the same time. Like that is allowed. It doesn't make you a bad person to be unhappy.
Yeah.
Right. So here's how the misery cycle goes, right? So something annoying happens at work. Like maybe your boss yells at you. Maybe somebody chews their gum too loud. It could be big or small, right? But whatever happens, you're like, so annoying. But then you go to your gratitude journal and you write down, oh, I'm grateful for my job. I'm grateful for this and that. I'm grateful for the stability. Okay. And then you start rationalizing. Like, well, it's not all that bad. Things could be worse. And then that turns into, I should be grateful. And then you kind of give yourself this like attitude adjustment where you're like, yeah, you know what? I can deal with this. And you know what? If I only change the way I look at this, it's not really bad at all. I can live with this. In fact, this is great. Right? So you don't do anything about it. You don't take any actions. You don't change anything about your life. So you know what? The brilliant thing about this is that the attitude adjustment actually works for a time, like maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe even a year. But then something else happens, right? Like nothing changed. So maybe your boss is a jerk again, or maybe somebody chewed their gum too loud again. And then the whole thing starts over again and nothing has changed except it's a year later.
Yeah.
Right. So you can get yourself stuck in the cycle. And I mean, look, I did this for 7 years. This is coming from experience. That 7 years is a long time to be stuck in here, but that's what I did. That's how I can talk to you about it. The way out of this is to allow yourself to acknowledge the dissatisfaction, because the dissatisfaction is so important. It is such a rich source of information for yourself, right? When you dig into it, you can talk about, okay, well, why? And what would you like to do about it, right? When you acknowledge your dissatisfaction, when you acknowledge the source of it, then you have choices. Then you can decide, oh, maybe I want to do something different.
Love that. I love the whole cycle. I love it. It's just and I when you taught it and I saw it on your Facebook Live, I was like, that's exactly where I used to be. It's like, I could just see it. I could almost feel it back when I was going through it. Right. And you're absolutely right. It just kept me stuck even longer. It's just crazy. So another question we often get here is, obviously we're helping people get out of debt. We're helping people take control of their finances here. So, the more money you can feed your plan and the process, the faster things move, which is great. So, one of the number one questions we get is, how can I make more money? What are some things that I can do to make more money? And obviously a lot of people, will look at, maybe I'll sell some things, maybe I'll pick up a side job or a side hustle or some gig work or, things like that. And those are all great ideas. But are there ways that people can make more money just doing what they already do and asking for raises? And how does that work? And what do you coach and how do you help people with that? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I've worked with quite a few people. In fact, I would go so far as to say that it's the norm that you can, of course, this varies by industry and your local sort of market situations. But most of the people I work with, if they're doing a lateral move to do exactly the same thing, just somewhere else, or maybe they've asked for a raise, typically you can get like somewhere between 10 and 20% more for doing the same thing.
Wow.
Which is a lot, right?
Yeah.
That is a huge lever you could be pulling to be generating significantly more income, probably way more than your side gig.
Right.
The question I always end up asking is like, well, what's the difference, right? Why is it that one company, one environment was only willing to pay you so much, and then that place was willing to pay you 20% more? And actually, I just finished working with the client where his jump for doing the exact same thing for the same title was 50%.
Wow.
50, which to be quite honest, is it says less about the new offer and more about how really badly treated he was in the old job. But like, I mean, imagine the impact on your finances if you can have that magnitude of a change in your income.
Right.
So the most important thing is to like really, really root in your value, right? Know how much you are worth, like really, really own it, really get used to saying it, to express it. And this is part of why working on your resume is actually a really good place to start, because you get used to articulating your value. It feels a little uncomfortable at first if you're not used to it, but that is how you ask for a raise. That is how you ask for more salary when you're in a negotiation conversation.
Yeah, I love that. And the only thing I'm going to add to that, I think this is where your finances play a critical role too in working on these things, because let's give you two scenarios. Let's say the first scenario is old Brad. Old Brad was living paycheck to paycheck, and I counted at every single dollar that salary was bringing in to make my bills. I didn't have the confidence maybe to go into that office and ask for that raise in fear that maybe they'll look for somebody else because they're going to say, we can get someone cheaper than him. And now all of a sudden I've got an income issue, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas opposed to the other Brad who has his finances under control, has less debt, maybe no debt, has a sizable emergency fund for all those, crazy things that might happen where you get fired from your job or you need, a couple months salary, right? And that brings a whole new level of confidence going into that office and talking about a raise. So how do you feel the same way, or how does that play a role in some of this, do you think?
I mean, I think the most important thing is, I absolutely agree, right? Like the level of confidence you come in with is definitely going to affect the energy and how solid you are with asking for more, right? And it comes back down to what I said earlier about how many options do you have, right? If you have another job, lined up, even if you feel like you could line up another job, you don't have to have one, but if you feel like you can, you're going to come with a much different energy, right? And what I teach is, one of the most important things I teach that helps develop this confidence is, well, look at why the company's hiring in the first place, right? Because something's got to hurt enough to the company that they're going to be willing to go through the expense on their side to open up a headcount and hire for someone, right? It's expensive to hire. You got the salary, you got the benefits, you got to train the person, you got to pay the people who are training you, right? It's expensive. So something has to hurt enough to make it worth all that. And if you can figure out what that is, and if you can position yourself to say, hey, you know what? You got a problem? I love solving that problem. Maybe you should talk to me.
Yeah, I love that. So you talked about your resume and how important that is a part of this. And can you share a couple of tips? Maybe not even tips, but what are some? And you've mentioned this on a mastermind, so I'm going to ask you, what are some common mistakes that people make with their resume that holds them back from either getting the position that they want or not getting the money that they want, so on and so forth?
I mean, I love talking about this because they're everywhere, right? Look, everyone's guilty of making these mistakes. Even I was when I was getting started, right? I would say the two biggest mistakes is, one is you do not need to puff yourself up artificially. I posted this on my Facebook a little while ago. Somebody made a joke about like, how would you put "I changed a light bulb" on your resume? And somebody wrote, single-handedly managed the successful upgrade and deployment of new environmental illumination system with zero cost overruns and zero safety incidents. I mean, like, brilliant, but also like, BS detector going off there.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So like, you don't need to do that. I don't know where all this mumbo jumbo about like stuff in the stats, stuff in the keywords came from. Like, I have a feeling that it comes from like all the algorithmic scanning of resumes, but like, the truth of the matter is that actually makes you blend into the stack because everyone else is doing the same thing instead of making it stand out. And the worst part is that it actually leaves you feeling like a fraud, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's really easy to trigger imposter syndrome if you're using extra big words for something that you're like, I just changed the light bulb.
I love that example.
And the other place where people get stuck is like, it does not need to be a masterpiece of like document design. Like, unless you're a designer, in which case, yeah, that's your job. But like, so many people are like, what font should I use? What bullet size should I use? What's my spacing? Like, no. Let's back up. That's the last thing that you should be working on. The first thing you should be working on is, what are the stories that make you excited, right? What are the stories you are proud to tell that showcase your superpowers that also get the employer excited? If you can get those, then you're 90% done.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. And you have a whole workshop on resume writing. Can you share what that is and where people can find that?
Yeah, it's called Irresistible Resume. You can find that at irresistibleresume.com. It's all about how to create. It goes through the steps: plan, design, write, distill your irresistible, interview-grabbing resume. And if you want to, I show you how to do it in just one weekend, right? So many people procrastinate, or they feel like, oh my God, I'm going to do it, and then, laundry needs to get done, so then you don't do it, right? This is about like getting it done quickly, and getting it done painlessly. In fact, I go so far as to say it might be even fun and enjoyable.
Imagine that, right? Imagine that. And what website? What website can they go to? I know you said irresistibleresume.com, but where can they get more information about you?
So irresistibleresume.com for the resume workshop. And if you want to just learn more about me and find out about, my coaching work, what I do, you can go to untamedcareer.com.
Awesome. Anthony, thanks for joining us on the show, man. It was a great conversation. And again, if you're feeling stuck, go check out what Anthony's doing. He's helping people out with this. In fact, I told Anthony a couple days ago, like, if I was going through a career transition, like, this is like a no-brainer for me. I didn't even know like something like this existed to have a coach help through that process. But what an awesome idea, and what an awesome way to serve people. So great job, Anthony.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Hey, what's this I see? I thought this was a party! Let's
All right. That sound means it's time for the celebrations of the show. And today we're kicking it off with Lori Lynch. Lori says, I caught my mortgage payment up and finally current, was able to put $1,000 into my emergency fund, and her monthly budget is completed. Fantastic. Great job, Lori.
Rebecca Ruiz, after a rough week starting from losing an income, we needed 2 new tires on our van. Thank goodness for our emergency fund. We didn't have to stress. Still have $300 in savings and been working hard on sticking to the shopping budget.
Yep. Perfect example of that emergency fund. Great job, Rebecca.
Latoya Johns paid off $1,300 and $2,000 collection accounts, filed my 2020 taxes, and have $100 in emergency fund, and my monthly budget is completed.
Awesome. Great job, Latoya. Fedra Baker set aside $1,000 for a new car. Awesome. Way to save up for that. I love that.
Tiffany Richard, we paid cash for a bowling ball so my husband and I can join a bowling league for a night out together each week rather than putting it onto a card.
That is awesome. I love bowling, by the way. I'm not very good at it. But
I used to be in a bowling league.
Really? Mm-hmm. My wife she's a really good bowler. She can make the ball curve and do all that stuff. I can't do any of that stuff. I need those bumpers up, But I do enjoy bowling. It's a lot of fun. All right. And then, sorry, Ryan, you're up next.
Desiree Williams, a little win, but it's a win. No fast food or coffee runs this week. And here there are no little wins, so that is a big win.
That is huge.
To be able to accomplish that.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with us here today. We love your feedback, and it also helps us grow our YouTube show. So please give us a like or leave us some honest feedback on this video. And if you want the latest from the show, obviously be sure to hit that notification bell and subscribe to our channel. And for the latest resources, or if you want more information on how to kick debt and financial stress, please be sure to check out the links in this video or head over to therealdebtfreedad.com. We'll see you guys on an upcoming show. Take care.